Welcome to my office, which is right here in Kiev. I'm going to make sure the share screen thing's working here. Okay. Hurrah. All right. So I am all of those titles, but more importantly, I'm a guy who lives in Ukraine since the 1990s. I own several businesses. I operate them. I work here. I live here. I have friends here, family here. The 90s was a long time ago, so I'm not even going to try to count how many years that is. If you heard me speak at the uh, uh, opening ceremony, you undoubtedly heard me make some factually accurate, optimistic forecasts about Ukraine. The business economy here is going to accelerate and accelerate and accelerate as, at the invitation of the EU. And I just can't emphasize that enough, the invitation of the EU. In the 1990s, the idea that Ukraine had joined the EU was just crazy. So big acceleration. There's going to be a lot of international companies coming here, a lot of Ukrainian companies expanding, accessing the European market. So we have really good times ahead of us. And something that I really love about being in Ukraine is, you know, I'll give you a perfect example, mobile phones, right? It was easier for Ukraine to make this jump from old landlines to mobile phones because you had a much smaller legacy problem. Okay, yes, you had the telephone company, but it was just easier to jump over that. And I think we're going to see the same thing. Well, we have the potential to do the same thing with market economy development, business in general in Ukraine. We can, kind of jump over some of these old, quite frankly, not socially responsible, not sustainable global corporate business models, and we can begin to build and reform and operate businesses that are sustainable. And I'm going to tell you what I mean by that in a minute. They are responsible. Tell you what I mean by that. So I think this is a good opportunity. And everything that you were talking about prior to this, based on that one slide I saw, fits in rather nicely with what we're going to talk about today. Now, if we're going to talk about building and operating a socially responsible business, well, like it or not, we're talking about building and operating socially responsible corporation. Because this thing we call a corporation, which we're going to dive into here in a minute, this thing we call a corporation is how human beings accomplish pretty much everything. You want to educate people, form a corporation, become a university. You want to produce and sell video games, form a corporation, and then produce and sell video games, and on it goes. Almost everything we do using this vehicle that we call a corporation. But there's a couple questions we don't talk about enough, and one of them is exactly what is a corporation, okay? and the other thing that almost never gets talked about is why. I mean, why do we have them? What's the purpose? Okay. So we're going to touch on those two issues because we need to see the milieu in which we operate, the business milieu, and the business paradigms, the market economy paradigms and business models in which we operate in our economy, whether we want to have a socially responsible business or a casino. Okay. We're going to be in the same market with the same paradigms and the same models. And we need to understand the what and the why. And then we'll talk about how to build the kind of businesses that the global economy must build if we're going to have a sustainable global economy. It's that simple. Okay, let's see if this is working. Okay. The first thing that we have to understand is that a corporation is not a human being. Now, some politicians, I remember a guy running for president in America named Mitt Romney, who was very fond of saying corporations are people too. No, they are not. Corporations are intangible legal constructs. They're pieces of paper, literally. They're computer spreadsheets, they're tax ID numbers. Okay, that's what they are, right? No, I can go meet Mark Zuckerberg, but I cannot meet Facebook because one's a person, maybe, and one is not. So not a human being. It's intangible. It's a tax ID number. It's licenses and permissions, and okay, that's what a corporation is, and that's good. We got to have that, okay, but it's not a person. Now, what is it then? Well, it's, as we've already talked about, it's a vehicle. It's a vehicle that we use to do things. You want to produce cement and sell it, you got to create a corporation, right? You want to do, I mean, just you want to save the whales. Good idea. You got to create a corporation. Corporations are it's just the vehicle we use. But I cannot stress enough that the first big mistake we made going back about 40, 50 years now is that we changed this thing we call a corporation, created by human beings. We created it, and we changed our creation to be kind of a Frankenstein's monster. And we gave it, shall we say, human qualities. And I'm going to spell those out very factually here as we go forward. So here's why corporations are important. And they're important because we human beings made them important. Okay, we gave them importance. Corporations are important because they have agency. This is a powerful concept. And agency, as I put up there, my own little definition, it's just the ability and the capacity to achieve a particular result. Okay, human beings have agency, right? We can sign contracts. We can enter into relationships. We can achieve particular results because we have agency. We can take decisions and implement our decisions. We have agency. But what we have done, and it's not necessarily a bad thing, but good, bad, two sides of the same coin. Okay. What granting agency to corporations has done is it has done these two things simultaneously. Because a corporation has agency, it exists separately from its owners. Think of an old company, Ford Motor Company in America, more than 100 years old, 120, 30 years old. Every original shareholder of Ford Motor Company, every owner, every director, it has crossed the Rainbow Bridge. Okay, they're no longer with us. Okay, they died, but the corporation still exists. It's still here. So that's some pretty powerful agency, because what that means is that theoretically a corporation can exist forever. And there are lots of corporations that are 100 years old, 200 years old. All right. If we want to define what we'll say a modern era corporation, you're talking 200 years maximum. Okay. Corporations themselves didn't exist before maybe the, 16th or 17th century. I think of the Dutch East India Company and like that. But because corporations have been granted agency, and that means they exist separately from their owners, and they can exist theoretically forever. And Just a second here. We'll try to make this go away. So, okay. Anyway, so the last point, which I couldn't see because I'm using somebody else's computer here, had to do with signing legal contract. Okay, now think about this. A corporation can sign a legal contract. It can do things legal and illegal in the name of the corporation because it has agency. Here's an example. In the United States, there's a bank, one of the top 5 biggest banks, named Wells Fargo. Wells Fargo admitted to violating very serious federal criminal fraud laws. They defrauded their customers. They admitted defrauding their customers, and they paid several billion dollars in compensation. But think how strange that is. Here's a paper corporation that was found that admitted its federal criminal guilt. And so a paper corporation who defrauded and damaged real human beings paid a penalty to a paper government, because a government is also just a piece of paper. It's a constitution. It's just a piece of paper. So the victims were human beings. The criminal was a corporation, and the beneficiary of the crime was a paper government. Well, I'm not saying they shouldn't have paid a penalty. Here's the point. Not one single member of the board of directors, not one single shareholder was held accountable for the crimes of the company they own, the crimes of the company they manage. That's what giving agency to corporations has created. It's a bit of a problem. In fact, not only was no human being held accountable for the crimes, and legally it was impossible to hold them accountable because they didn't commit the crimes. The bank committed the crimes. I mean, they just work here. I'm just the president and the CEO. Okay. There was a woman who was directly responsible, the creator and the administrator of the crime, the federal fraud crimes committed by the Wells Fargo Bank. She, of course, was fired and given a $100 million severance package. So there you have it. Okay. So this brings us to the single most important thing I want to talk about. Why do corporations exist? If you have looked at pretty much any business textbook or gone to pretty much any business school in the world since the 1980s, you will be taught the maxim, the law, the obvious common knowledge that corporations exist to maximize shareholder profits. Now, that's not in all textbooks, not in all business schools, not in all classes, but it is the dominant economic paradigm governing the global business economy. It is the dominant business model governing how corporations behave. Corporations exist to maximize shareholder profits. This started with an economist named Milton Friedman from the University of Chicago, who brought the academic justifications, laid the academic foundation for this new paradigm, and it was new in the 80s. I went to universities, 3 of them in the 1970s, and I studied economics and finance and accounting, and I was never, ever, ever told that corporations exist to maximize shareholder profits. It was a different paradigm. It was a different model, okay? So here's the question that we, you, me, everybody who's involved in business economics, we have to ask ourselves one really important question. True or false? What do you think? I mean, it has to be true. There's a lot of textbooks. Milton Friedman was a prize-winning economist. Ronald Reagan, who implemented politically, legally, regulatorily. Ronald Reagan implemented the political, legal, regulatory aspects of this business model during his presidency. He was president for 2 terms, so okay. Spoiler alert: my personal belief, and that of a lot of people who study sustainability, who study this idea of socially responsible corporations. I'm going to argue today, and I'm going to show you some what I think is evidence and proof that that statement is absolutely false. It is absolutely false. Corporations do not exist, even accepting the current business model, the current economic paradigm. Corporations do not exist to maximize shareholder profits. That's false. Okay, Paul. If it's false, then what? And here's the answer. We'll put it up here and let you just kind of absorb that. But this is the answer. This is the incredibly serious business, economic, hard-nosed. I make a profit in my businesses here and in America, and I'm here to tell you, corporations do not exist to maximize profit. They exist to fulfill a purpose. Otherwise, why would we create them? Right? To fulfill a purpose, it means to do something. Concordia University is a corporation. We have a purpose. Our purpose is to provide university-level education in economics and business, and I hope a little more diplomacy. I'm a big fan of diplomacy in business, but we want to. Our purpose is to do education. And how do we do education? Well, we create a corporation, and if we fulfill our purpose admirably, if we are really successful at fulfilling our purpose, then we will prosper. Our students will prosper. Our communities will prosper because there's never too much education, right? So that's our purpose. Ukr-Energo is a corporation, world class, by the way, and Ukr-Energo has a purpose to produce and supply energy, particularly electricity. That is the purpose of Ukr-Energo. Its purpose is to produce and supply energy. Now, it can also prosper. It can also make a profit, but its purpose is to produce and supply energy, right? Concordia's purpose is to provide education. That's our purpose. And I don't choose these 2 examples just arbitrarily. If you want a business to be economically sustainable, then it's a good idea that what your business does is it solves a human problem. It meets a human need. Human beings need electricity. Human beings need education. So 100 years from now, there'll still be schools because schools meet a human need and they solve a human problem. Okay, there may not be video game companies as we would define them today, but there will be schools. Okay, there will be companies supplying energy, and even 100 years from now, almost certainly electric energy. How we produce the energy will change, hopefully, more solar, less oil. But these businesses, these industries are going to be, shall we say, economically and business-wise sustainable because they solve a human problem. They meet a human need. So we don't exist to fulfill, we do exist to fulfill a purpose. That's what the corporation was created for. It was not created to maximize profit. Think about this. Profit is not a purpose. I mean, just, let that sink in. It's psychologically really important, really powerful. Profit is not a purpose. Education is a purpose. Supplying energy is a purpose. Dynamo Kiev has a purpose to entertain with sports and win games. Okay, right? So, but profit is a financial measure, quote, quote, of success. It, Financial profit is how our current business model, our current economic paradigm is designed. It is designed to measure success according to how much profit you're making. Well, okay, fine, but profit is not a purpose. It's what happens if you fulfill your purpose successfully, right? It's the cart in front of the horse, but it needs to be behind the horse. The horse is the purpose, and the cart is what you carry your profit in. It's even worse. It's even worse than that, because this financial measure of success that we use, profitability, it is really poorly defined and a poorly understood concept. It's incomplete, it's inaccurate, and it's misleading. And I'm going to show you what I believe is some evidence coming up here to prove that it's incomplete, prove that it's inaccurate. And if we assume that it is incomplete and inaccurate, then looking at a financial measure of profit is also misleading. It's misleading because it's inaccurate. It's misleading because it's incorrect. And if you take decisions based on misleading information, right? Misinformation, or what politicians call fake news, right? If you're taking decisions based on misleading information, those are going to be at best suboptimal and at worst disastrous. And by the way, when you look out at the environmental destruction that we're all facing globally, a lot of that can be traced back to bad decisions based on misleading information, because we're using a business model, an economic paradigm that says maximize profit, maximize profit, maximize profit. So let me try to put some meat on those bones, my statements, okay? And here's how we're going to do that. We're going to now switch to the other side of the coin, which is the socially responsible corporation side. We've got the maximize profit regardless model, and now we've got, which is not socially responsible. I can argue that there's not a single major corporation anywhere in the world that does operate socially responsibly. Okay. But on the other side of that coin is, well, the type of corporation that can be sustainable in all ways and can be socially responsible. So let's build it, and then let's compare it to where we are, so we understand what we have to do to get to a global economy that's dominated by socially responsible corporations, not rapacious profit maximizing corporations. Okay, so all of us together are now the shareholders. This is going to be a 100% equity corporation. We're all the shareholders. We're all putting in money, and we're going to start with that guy. And remember, that guy is not a human being, all right? Because the first thing we're going to have to do, we got to get a business license, got to open up, get permissions, get a tax ID number, have a statute, have an agreement, right? We got to have all those pieces of paper, all those stamps, all those approvals. Now we got that. So let's build our corporation. How? How are we going to build our corporation? We're going to build our corporation by assembling capital assets. Okay, to use the pure professional economist jargon, we're going to build this corporation by assembling capital assets. And what kind of capital assets? Here's an easy one. Money. Money. We've got the pieces of paper. The corporation exists. We have a bank account, got a tax ID number. The first thing we got to do is we got to get money, financial capital. Now, so far so good. Now we got our corporation. We got some financial capital in a bank, and it's all owned by us, the shareholders. But now we're going to have to add second component, and it's what I call produced capital. Buildings, equipment, proprietary software, patents, brands, land. Notice some of this produced capital is physical stuff, a building, equipment. And some of this produced capital is proprietary software that we develop, or it's patents, or it's a brand. Brands are really powerful things, right? If you don't believe me, ask Mercedes. Brands are powerful things. So, pause. We're going to come back to this in more detail, but I want you to look at that. If we stop building our corporation right there, there's no problem. We can go operate. We got money. We got assets. We're good. If we stop right there, we have a business model called shareholder capitalism. Shareholder, not stakeholder. We're going to talk about that in a minute. Shareholder capitalism, because the shareholders, us, we own the corporation, which means we own all the produced capital. We own the brands, we own the software, we own the buildings, we own the equipment. Shareholder capitalism. That's what is meant when somebody says, "Oh, shareholder capitalism." When you hear the phrase shareholder capitalism, that's what you're seeing. You're seeing a corporate entity that has two basic kinds of asset, produced and money. Okay? That is not environmentally sustainable. It's not sustainable for human beings. It's not sustainable for society. It may be very good for the shareholders, but it's, we're missing some legs here, some feet. We're missing some asset. The most obvious asset we're missing is that one. Natural capital. Every business consumes resources, natural resources. We consume them. We might enhance them. But most of the time, corporations consume them and degrade them. And very rarely does any corporation enhance natural capital. Look, do you want to build a data center? That's really hot 21st century stuff, man. Data centers consume vast amounts of water. Data systems in an otherwise agricultural area will consume so much water that they lower the water table and bankrupt farmers who can't afford to drill, a 500, 700 meter well. So data center's cool, but it's damaging the water. system because it's lowering the water table, bankrupting farmers. Okay. Um, no water, you might get some desertification. This is happening in the southern half of Ukraine as we speak, desertification, and that's an environmental problem. So, as a socially responsible, sustainable corporation, we're going to recognize and we're going to measure and we're going to report, at least internally to ourselves, so we can understand, what do we have to do to mitigate or the damage, or perhaps enhance the environment in which we rely upon. Once if you're building furniture in a forest, once you cut down the last tree, there goes your business. Okay. Here's another one. Hurrah. I knew people had to be in there somewhere. Here's another one. Human capital. Okay. Corporations cannot operate without human capital. Now, I purposefully use the word capital, okay, because my brain likes it. My heart hates it. My heart says, Paul, take that purple bubble and call it human being. But my economist brain said, no, Paul, take that purple bubble and call it human capital. And there's some good common sense to that. Okay, let's assume we need 100 people to work at our company. We're not just going to go out, throw a net, catch 100 people, and put them to work. Nah, we're going to want human beings who have real capital. They're accountants, they're finance specialists, they're marketing specialists, right? They're branding specialists, they're engineers, right? And many different types of engineers. Okay, so we need real human capital. I mean, people who have value they can add to our corporation. Well, fine. Are we finished? No. Sorry, I know it's a Saturday and like to be finished. Because there's something else we have to consider. Seriously, I'm a hard-nosed business guy. We have to consider social capital, because who produces the engineers and the lawyers and the accountants and the branding specialists? I mean, who and all the brilliant tradespeople, electricians and plumbers who built our factory. Where do we get these people? We didn't educate them. We just found them and hired them. And so what we're doing is we're extracting social capital in this way. If you meet an engineer, a 30-year-old brilliant engineer, any kind of engineer, well, this woman didn't just parachute in from space. She went to public schools. She went to K-12. She went to a university, maybe a second university, maybe some highly specialized engineering trade studies. Okay, it's not easy to build a bridge. And how does our engineer get to work? She drives on a public road, or she rides on a public bus, or she takes a public train, right? And oh, by the way, what happens to her when she leaves the office? Well, she goes home. Oh, really? Does she have security? Does she have a fire department, a police department? Does somebody, dear God, please, somebody come in a big truck and pick up her garbage? This is social capital. And it's not just physical social capital, it's also intangible social capital, like, a local government that believes in business and supports business, like people who think that it's I can have a good life if I go to work for this company, okay? Because what they're doing is socially responsible, right? It's not a casino, it's like some other kind of business. So our corporation, whether we like it or not, whether we know it or not, whether we admit it or not. And come on, we're all smart. We all know that we're consuming human, social, and natural capital. We're not stupid. We know that, but we kind of ignore it, and we concentrate on, the price of the shares of our company in the stock market. So we're all consuming all of those things, but the consumption is not recorded. It's not measured. It's not recorded. It's not in any way compensated. It's not in any way required to be compensated. Okay. This is kind of where we've lost our way with the, corporations exist to maximize profit model. I hope what that picture says to you is, well, actually, no, corporations exist to maximize benefits for all stakeholders. Stakeholders. This is the difference between stakeholder capitalism and shareholder capitalism. Stakeholder capitalism recognizes human, natural, and social capital. It recognizes the damage we do. It also recognizes the benefits that we create, right? I mean, we might set up a scholarship fund. It's a small thing, but it's going to help, right? It's positive, okay? So these three bubbles, green, black, and whatever that color is, that's shareholder, and all five of them together are stakeholder. Now, let me provide a little evidence to support my claim. Any student unfortunate enough to sit through my seminars on critical thinking will hear me say, I don't know, 9 million times, you can't just say stuff. You can't just say stuff. Gotta have a theory. You gotta have some data. You gotta have some evidence. Okay, can't just say stuff. Here's my evidence. Now, this is not a class in accounting. I want to get a good review, so this is not a class in accounting. All right. I make a lot of jokes about accounting. My mother, my father, my brother were all accountants, and so I thought in my career I would get as far away from accounting as I could. So then I studied economics, and then I started opening businesses, and then damn, I'm dealing with accounting like up to here. Okay, you can't escape from accounting. But we're not going to talk about anything except just one thing. I want you to focus on one and only one thing, and that is the left side of this very typical. Let me emphasize that. This is a very, very typical balance sheet. Very typical. Millions of them look like this. And if you look on just the left side, the asset side, read the line items. Just read them. Don't think about where do they come from and how, and that's accounting. Just read them. And then ask yourself this question. What kind of assets are those? Drum roll. They are financial assets and they are produced capital. It's financial capital and it's produced capital. And it is only financial capital and produced capital. Period. Full stop. Cash, accounts receivable, prepaid expenses, investment. Okay. I don't know what kind of inventory that is, but those are financial capital items. Land, buildings, equipment, okay, intangibles like computer software. Those are produced capital. There's nothing on that balance sheet that is not financial capital or produced capital. Where's human? Where's natural? Where's social? It's not on the balance sheet. There's nothing there, nothing that recognizes our investment in or our consumption of those sources of capital. They're not there. They just, poof, they don't exist. Okay, don't exist. Yeah, I wonder why we have so much environmental destruction. It's a mystery. They don't exist. And because they don't exist, I can say factually with evidence that balance sheet is incomplete. And in fact, let me say this. Balance sheet is slang. It's slang. That thing is called a statement of financial position. Now, just listen to that name. Listen to that name. It's not a statement of sustainability position. It's not a statement of responsible position. It's a statement of financial position because that's all we care about. Our current global business model, economic paradigm, that's all we care about. We just care about financial profit and owning and controlling physical things. And because the left side's incomplete, then by definition, it is, after all, a balance sheet. Then by definition, the right side is incomplete, which means what? Which means we're not recognizing any liabilities. The social capital, like the city in which our factory is located, we're not recognizing any liabilities other than wages to human beings. We're not recognizing the existence of the natural environment. It doesn't even exist in there. But that's our model. And obviously, it's been a successful model, but at the same time, it's been a really damaging model, socially, environmentally. Okay, go to a city in America where a Walmart comes. I once did some free consulting work for the mayor of a small city in eastern Kentucky, which is sort of like America's answer to Buryatia, right? I mean, it's and I went there and he said, Paul, help me figure out how to bring back all the small businesses, all the mom and pop shops, we call them, all the small businesses, because they've all closed. And I said to him, okay, here's my solution. Shut down the Walmart store. Walmart, as you probably know, it's like the world's largest retailer. I mean, it's like an epicenter, only bigger. Okay. And I said, shut down the Walmart. Now, I was half serious, half joking because it's too late. Can't shut down the Walmart. Those businesses are gone forever. You're not going to get them back. And as the mayor told me, he says, well, don't quote me, but I hate Walmart. But if I shut Walmart down, then we'll have the worst of both worlds. We don't have any other businesses. People to buy groceries are going to have to travel 60 miles to the closest big city to go grocery shopping. Well, that's not a good idea. So, you can get yourself in a bit of a pickle here. We're always kind of a product of our past decisions, our old psychology holding us down, holding us back. Okay, let's make sure we're really clear about this. The difference between shareholder capitalism and stakeholder. If we look at that balance sheet, we look at the assets, we just saw that financial and produced capital, they're measured and they're reported. And by the way, I'm not trash talking accounting. I love my mother, father, and brother. I'm not, seriously, our accounting systems, our financial reporting systems, they measure what we want them to measure, right? They're tools, just like a corporation is a tool. So the problem is not the accounting system. The problem is not balance sheets, except when you have to take a final exam, then they can be a problem. But the problem is not accounting, it's not financial statements. The problem is we haven't designed these systems to measure costs and benefits in a holistic way. We're just measuring 3 of those bubbles, not all the bubbles. And of course, as we just saw, nowhere on that balance sheet, asset side, liability side, there's no measuring, there's no reporting of human, social, natural capital. What we consumed, what we invested, what we degraded, what we enhanced. Not there, not there. So let's shift to the from the accounting to the all-important psychological, cultural psychological. Do you know why Ukraine is rapidly entering the European Union faster than any other country ever did, now that it's been invited? I mean, some countries took 20 years to get there. Ukraine's going to be there in 3 to 5. Because Ukraine has undergone a massive shift in cultural psychology. This is why the Russians are angry with us. A massive, massive shift in cultural psychology. We're Europeans, right? So cultural, I mean, we are European, period. Ukrainians are European, period. Now, if you went back to the 1930s, it would be hard to say that because, slavery is a difficult thing. Okay. So the psychology of who we are, how we build our companies, how we fulfill our purposes, how we compensate everything in our reality. This is all cultural psychology because it took a certain cultural psychology to create the balance sheet as we currently know it. And now we have to, evolve a different cultural psychology that will allow us to redefine and recreate all these tools of business like balance sheets and what are you legally required to measure and report. Okay. And here you can see the really stark difference. Where it says shareholder, that's where we are. And where it says stakeholder, that's where we need to be. And we're going there. By the way, I hope I'm not getting you depressed. Hopefully you're not being depressed here. Human beings are always evolving. And we're actually, in terms of business economic, we're slowly, too slow, evolving into a very different kind of business model economic paradigm. And it's you guys and millions and millions and millions of people in your generation, the one above you, the ones coming behind you. This is where the change is coming from. So big psychological, and at the bottom you're going to see back to reality, a big business economic thing. Shareholder capitalism, maximize profit. Stakeholder capitalism, fulfill a purpose. A big difference. Fulfill a purpose. And then, hopefully, make a profit. But don't start with the goal of profit. Start with the goal of fulfilling a purpose, which includes compensating all stakeholders. Right? Be successful, make a profit. So that's a big psychological difference. Shareholder capitalism, by definition, must have a short-term focus. It must, because it's focusing on what? Share holders, people who own shares in the company. Whether you're traded on a stock market or not is irrelevant. If I own 10% of a company, I own 10% of a company, whether I own it in direct equity or I own it indirectly because I bought shares of stock, through JP Morgan or something. So because shareholder capitalism has this model of maximizing shareholder profit, it has to be short term because you have to look at the quarterly stock price, the quarterly sales, the quarterly profit, right? And stakeholder capitalism, by definition, must have a long-term focus. When you're talking about the environment, the natural capital, when you're talking about natural capital, if you're a furniture company that exists in the middle of a forest of trees, you better have a long-term focus because it takes a long time to grow trees. And so you got to have a long-term focus. If all you care about is maximizing profits, then you cut the trees down as fast as you can, produce and sell as much furniture, and then go find another forest. And that's kind of the business model we have globally. And we can't afford that model anymore. Okay. It was easy, but we can't afford it. This idea of skewed compensation. Obviously, compensation is skewed if the only people you care about are shareholders. You don't care about school teachers educating the engineers that give you those profits for your shareholders. You don't care about the fact that you're cutting down all the trees for your furniture factory. So equitable compensation just means that we measure, we report, we compensate all stakeholders. That's the natural environment, human being. And the most important is society, social capital. Okay, we must evolve towards a psychology where companies care about the communities in which they're located. This has been a big problem with globalization, right? I mean, I support the concept, but if you go and talk to people who are really upset about globalization, they're so upset they're voting for the alternative for Germany political party, for God's sake. One of the reasons is because their personal human capital has been, shall we say, ignored, and the communities in which they live have been devastated. Devastated because the company is there, or devastated because the company left there. I was just off in eastern Ukraine. Look, if you go to you can go to lots of places in Ukraine and you'll see dead coal mines. You'll also see dead communities. And putting the war aside, let's use the U.S. for example. If you go to Kentucky, you're going to find a lot of dead coal mines, West Virginia, and a lot of dead cities, towns, villages, dead because the only employer was that coal mine. Now, when the coal mine existed, we all had jobs, but we all died in our 40s of black lung disease. But at least we had a job. Now the company closes and it's gone. We still have black lung disease, but we don't have a job, right? And we never had health care. We never had health care, never, because our company didn't give us health care. Our community's too poor to give us health care. Our government doesn't give us health care, don't have a job. So, right, it's just a human disaster. So the most important thing about evolving towards stakeholder capitalism, whether you're doing it inside an existing company or in our case, we're building a new company, we have to focus on this issue of equitable compensation. Now, before I wax too philosophical, that bottom line, back to business, economics, finance, accounting, this is a real biggie here. What is the very best way to maximize shareholder profitability? The very best way is to not incur any costs, if possible. Just only revenue, no cost. Well, Paul, that's impossible. There's always cost. Well, there's always some cost, but our shareholder capitalism model gives us the incentive. It encourages us to externalize all the human, all the social, and all the environmental costs of our business. Because if we externalize all those costs, our profit goes up. And if our profit goes up, our share price goes up. And because I'm the CEO and my compensation is tied to the share price, I'm becoming richer and richer, even as I'm destroying the environment and destroying the very communities in which my business is located. But I don't care, because this is shareholder capitalism. My compensation is tied to the share price. Couple facts. Got to make sure I got the numbers right. In the 1970s, A typical CEO of an American company had a salary. Very rarely did they have stock options and, stock compensation as part of their personal income. They mostly just got a salary, and it was about 20 times bigger than the median salary of the people who worked there, right? So you get $1, I get $20. Okay. By the way, I deserve 20. I don't know if you deserve the one, but 20 sounds good. 20 to 1. Today it is 300 to 1. I've known a lot of CEOs. I've worked with bank chairmen. I've educated people who became finance ministers. I've conducted training programs for national. I have never met a CEO of any corporation. I've worked with lots of corporations. I've never met a CEO of any corporation who was 300 times smarter than the median worker, 300 times more successful, 300 times more efficient, 300 times more productive. It's just absurd. And not only that, but today, at least 70%, you can check me on some of these numbers. They're general. They're not exactly accurate, but they're not inaccurate either. Something probably around 70%, I'm going to guess, of all CEOs, they only get I'm sorry, about 70% of the compensation of a typical CEO is coming now from stock options. 20-30% is their salary. Why? It reduces their personal income taxes. And so if 70-80% of my annual compensation is stock in the company, I have an incentive to push up the value of the stock. And what's a really great way to push up the value of the stock? Do not incur expenses. Fire as many workers as you can. Externalize all these environmental, social, human costs. Keep them out of your financial records, right? And that you're going to maximize profit for the company. You're going to maximize wealth and income for yourself. And so it's kind of a negative reinforcing cycle. Okay. And I'm not saying people are bad, and I'm saying corporations are bad. I'm not. I'm a person. I own several corporations. I like myself. I'm a good guy. It's yes, there are some bad actors, but 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 the system is the problem, right? Our system of what do we measure, what do we report, what do we compensate, what is important, what is not important, right? How do we behave as a business, as an economy? This is where we've lost our way, and there's a lot of work going on to kind of get us back onto a more sustainable path. Okay, we're gonna finish up here. I promise. I think I only got two slides here. The most important thing that you can do if you create your own business, or you can help change if you're inside of a business, willing to evolve. Not a coal mine, not a casino, but, a business willing to evolve. We have to create a cultural, psychological business model, economic paradigm where we align our corporate purpose with a social purpose. Today, that simply almost doesn't exist. It just almost doesn't exist. And let me give you a couple of examples of this, okay? Concordia, again, right? We're a not-for-profit educational corporation. Okay, we call ourselves an educational institution. We're a corporation. We have aligned our corporate purpose with a social purpose. This is why, by the way, little propaganda, this is why our faculty and our administrators are so dedicated to education, and why they believe in you and work with you, and because they're part of this psychology we have that aligns our corporate purpose with a social purpose. What is our corporate purpose? To provide university level education in economics and business. What is the social purpose? To increase the supply of young, brilliant, energetic, motivated people to enter the government sector, the business sector, the social sector. They're all co-equally important. So go into business or go into social, go into the government sector to improve the economy and improve the country and help make the lives of people better. Right? That's the social purpose of education, and that's our purpose, our corporate purpose, and that's our social purpose, and they're in perfect alignment. Okay, that is responsible. That is ethical. Maybe we'll succeed. Maybe we'll fail. But we have our corporate purpose and our social purpose in perfect alignment. And that, by the way, creates a very high level of motivation. I've been working with this school for 9 years, pro bono, because I believe in the purpose. I believe that our purpose is aligned, corporate and social. And so I'm really happy to contribute to the school, right? We have to make sure as we go forward in life that not everything we do, I keep ragging at casinos. Okay, call them entertainment, right? We're always going to kind of do things that might be frivolous and funny or wasteful. I don't know, but like go gambling at a casino. But more and more and more, I see companies really focusing on this issue of meeting a human need and solving a human problem. There's a great example that I read from once in an article many years ago by a Harvard business professor. And he uses the example of a drill, right? We all know what a drill is. Take it, the machine, and you put a hole in something. And he explained it this way. He said, nobody needs a drill. That's actually profoundly true. Who needs a drill? Nobody needs a drill. What they need is a hole. They have a problem. Their problem is they need a hole and they don't have a hole. Maybe they need a hole in wood or a hole in metal, small hole, big hole, one hole, million holes. Doesn't matter. They have a problem. They need a hole and they don't have a hole. So they look out into the marketplace of solutions, which is what our business economy is supposed to be about. And they find the solution, in this case, the drill, that meet their need. So I presume we're going to, 100 years from now, there'll still be drills, right? Because I guess people are going to always need to put holes in things. So meet a human need, solve a human problem. And this is a really difficult one. I mean, technically, scientifically, intellectually, this is really, really difficult. There's a lot of work being done on this all over the world by a lot of smart people in the government, in the private business sector. And so a lot of people figuring out how can we design, create a new business model, a new economic paradigm where we can actually measure performance relative to purpose. I mean, look, we're human beings. We have these brains, and our brains like to measure things. How far away is that lion from me? Should I start running now or can I wait a couple seconds, right? I mean, our brains exist to measure things where we're measuring things all the time. Can I pass this car, right? Can I pass this car safely? We're measuring. But it's really, really difficult to measure business performance, corporate performance, if you will, relative to purpose. but we have to figure out how to do that because we can't get back onto the right path, which we've lost in the last 50 years. We can't get back onto the path of having sustainable businesses, sustainable communities, sustainable humans, sustainable environment. We can't get back there unless we can figure out a way to measure performance relative to purpose so we know, are we going in the right direction? Are we actually gaining or are we losing? Is this real or is it just an illusion? If you don't have measures, you're just going to have dreams, and that doesn't work. So this is a really tough one. And the single most important thing we have to do, and by the way, try to end optimistically here, we are doing this. We have to compensate all stakeholders. We have to internalize into our businesses, into our communities, because these are human businesses and human communities, and these are human problems, and we need to holistically put them all together. And we need to find a way to compensate all stakeholders, human, social, environmental. We're making some progress. I mean, governments have environmental rules and regulations. Yes, they're sometimes ignored for political purposes, right? But I can assure you that when I was your age, there was no such a thing as an environmental protection agency. Not a single country anywhere in the world when I was going to college. It was created sometime in the 70s, but ironically by Richard Nixon, Republican. So we've been moving. Okay, when Franklin Roosevelt in the 1930s created labor unions, he was protecting and enhancing human capital. When he the U.S. government set a 40-hour work week, 8 hours a day. You got to be paid for overtime. When they establish what's called worker compensation, you get injured at the job, you don't get fired. While you're recovering, you get paid. Okay, all of these were steps to compensate human beings, and environmental rules, regulations are an attempt to compensate the environment. The problem is all that compensation is coming from governments or civil society. It's not coming from businesses because businesses aren't required to give a damn about social and environmental capital. They don't have to measure it. They don't have to report it. They're not rewarded for it. They're not penalized for it. I mean, they just ignore it. So at least we're recognizing human beings and our economy, and we're recognizing the environment, and we're making steps, towards the evolution of a sustainable business model, sustainable economic model. But the biggest problem, the biggest challenge, not problem, it's a challenge. In every challenge, there's an opportunity. And so the challenge is how to measure the investment in, improvement of, or the cost of taking it out, short term, long term, right? The environment, environmental damage needs an environmental enhancement. We need to find ways to measure it, to report it, and find mechanisms by which we can compensate the stakeholders, especially, now I'm going to go back to sounding like a preacher, especially communities. We have just, in our globalized market economy, we have just turned our backs on human society in the form of cities and towns and rural areas, and so we this is a really important thing. It's a really, really, really important thing. If you go to, there's in huge areas in the United States, for example, that, to use this horrible old language of first world, second world, third world, the United States has vast tracts of third world countries, not third world, just dystopian hellholes, because the businesses that were there failed take care of people and the environment and the societies. And now when the businesses are gone, all the damage, all the costs, especially human psychological cost, is just left behind and they walk away and they go find another town or another country. Okay. So we need to change the rules so that that behavior slowly gets kind of squeezed out of our operating system so we can be more sustainable. All right. I'm going to stop. But this is 2025. So I can't stop without a meme. This is one of my personal memes. Okay. Uh, uh, you want to be a business person? Great. Fulfill a purpose and prosper. And notice the order. Fulfill a purpose. That's what corporations exist to do. Fulfill a purpose and then prosper, as in make a profit, right? First, fulfill your purpose. And then if you're successful at doing that, prosper. And keep in mind that the one thing that's never going to change in this world is that we're a beautiful, just buffet of people. We're just this beautiful, huge, I would say rainbow, but okay, beautiful buffet of people. And so it's everybody, whoever those bodies are, working together to fulfill a purpose and prosper. And that's how I think of a socially responsible business. And I will leave it right there. Oops. Now I'm going to try to make everybody come back here. Okay, let's try that. I shut the sharing off. I don't know if you still see it. All right. All right. You know how frustrating it is to use someone else's laptop because they have a different keyboard and your finger automatically pushes a button that doesn't do what it should do because it's a different keyboard. So, all right. I'll leave it there. If anybody has comments, questions, at least I only took an hour or so.
Dear students, do you have any questions to our speaker? Yes, Maria.
I wanted to ask if you have some recommendation of books or movies, for example, about that.
Oh, about building socially responsible businesses and the like. Very good question. I promise I will put together a bibliography and send it off to Olga. Yeah, because there's some there's some articles and some books, and yeah, I'll put together some references and send that off to you. But there isn't a lot because there isn't a lot because since we don't have this kind of business model and economic paradigm, there isn't a lot being written about it. But yes, I will send some things to Olga, and I'm delighted that you're interested enough to dig deeper.
Yes, sure. I will share with you through the instructor. Yes.
Yeah, I'll send you something. And by the way, let me emphasize, there is no contradiction whatsoever between a business that operates, in a sustainable, responsible way, and they had to give up profit to do that. No, they don't. Patagonia, you want to get a perfect example of a company that is an environmentally, socially responsible company that compensates all stakeholders. Just go Google Patagonia, and you'll see how they operate, and they're enormously profitable. And but they're not perfect, for God's sake. How can you be, right? I mean, a Buddhist will tell you every time you take a step, you're killing something. So we're not talking about companies becoming saints here, but the way they operate has been quite rightfully hailed around the world. So just type in Patagonia and you'll get a really good example of how a business can be profitable while also compensating all stakeholders and being responsible. Oh, hi, Anastasia.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd like to ask you about more your own experience maybe in building socially responsible business. Was there maybe to what extent it was really maybe difficult for you to include everything, every aspect, and how long it took maybe?
Wow. First of all, that's a really great question. Secondly, I could think of nothing more dangerous than asking an old professor to share personal stories. What do we got? 10 hours? 10 hours? This is a 10-hour class, yeah? Okay. All right. I'm going to give a serious answer. The work I've done is all been in education. My businesses are in the services industry, like valuation, stuff like that. So I don't have any, direct experience at dealing directly with the environmental issues. Although just the fact that my company exists means I'm consuming electricity that comes from fossil fuel sources, right? Okay, so, all right. But if you look at the companies I have in Ukraine, it's a valuation business, right? So we tell companies there's a business value, but I hate to do that. Asset values, things like that. When we started the company in 1994, all the staff I hired knew nothing. How could they? There was no valuation industry under the Soviet Union, right? How much is that business worth? How much is that? What's the market value of that apartment? Hey, I want to borrow money from a bank. I have to pledge collateral. What's the value of this building and equipment? Okay, things like that. So they knew nothing. They were all smart. And so I had to train them. My time and my costs, I had to train them. And then we had a pact with our employees that, you behave honestly and responsibly in the company, and we'll take care of you forever. Now, we don't have any of those employees anymore, but one of them went on to be the chief appraiser of a very good large bank, and a couple of them went to investment firms. One of them set up a really successful auditing company. Okay, so we enhanced their intellectual capital. We always treated them fairly. When I have a birthday party, every one of my living employees in Ukraine comes over and hugs me and kisses me and gives me things I shouldn't eat. And so you can make this kind of a personal compact with your staff so that they know you care about their life, and you'll do whatever you can to enhance their personal value. Okay, the woman who set up the really successful auditing company, I mean, she wasn't born knowing how to do that. She learned that from us, me and my business partner. And because she's really smart and honest and energetic, boom, got clients, got a business, and now she makes bucket loads of money. So I don't want to hear you can't make money honestly in any country, in any business. She does and does. So there is that, and then the other thing I did to be a socially responsible human being is I found Concordia University, and I said, oh my God, they have a purpose, and it's a good purpose, and it's a social purpose, and so you have to give back. Okay, you have to give back, especially as you get older. I don't mean be an oligarch and a horrible guy your entire life, but then you build a a opera theater or you set up a school and then that makes everything okay. No, that's not what we want. Okay. Just be socially responsible. So we've done two things. One, I go out and I work with Concordia as much as I possibly can because I'm trying to give something back to education because I'm an academic, to society because I've benefited so much, to Ukraine because I've really prospered in Ukraine. Ukraine is, got great opportunity, right? You know that old curve they show you in textbooks, uh, high risk, high return. Well, okay, Ukraine is high risk, high return, so it's a great place to be. Then, and after this, I'll be quiet. The second thing, and this gets to your point, it took me 30 years to get to this point. I suddenly realized that, gosh, I have this incredible resume and maybe I can now help Ukraine in a different kind of way. So, for example, I went to work for, as an independent guy, the National Bank of Ukraine and Privat Bank as part of the team that sued Kolomoisky and Bogolubov for stealing billions of dollars from their bank, which then had to be paid for by the Ukrainian government using the taxes of people who barely make enough money to get by. That's wrong. And I said, okay, I'm going to go work on that. Now there's, you get threats and, okay, it's not easy. But I reminded myself that reform is something people talk about, but they don't seem to do it. And the best reform I can think of is accountability. Hey, you guys stole a few $billions from your bank. Let me help the bank get that money back from you. Okay. And it was all a civil thing. There's nothing criminal here. It's all civil. Should have been criminal, but it was all civil. You defrauded your bank of a few billion. I'm going to help the National Bank and Privat Bank get this money back because it should at least come back to the government. It'll never get back to the people whose taxes were wasted. But okay, accountability is reform. So at this stage in my career, I'm trying to do work to pursue certain legal reform issues, like holding accountable people who steal money from their own bank, and then also just do some personal things, like contributing to boring students to death on a Saturday morning. So, okay, I hope that kind of answers. But
yeah, as I see one more question, Maria.
Yeah, I'll be short. I wanted to ask if you had an opportunity
It won't.
if you had an opportunity to say something to all the people who's trying to build a social responsible corporation in one sentence, what would you say?
That look of shock and horror is somebody asking an old professor to say something important in one sentence. My God, woman, are you mad?
And special for Paul Thomas, yes, it's
Really
really.
for me. um, more like a couple bullet points. First of all, don't believe it can't be done. Do not believe it cannot be done profitably. Don't believe it can't be done, and don't believe it can't be done profitably. That's a bullet point. And you wanted one sentence. Okay. All right. It can be done. It can be profitable. Just don't listen to the naysayers. Just do it. All right. Sorry. You know what I was told in the 90s when I came here and literally with 3 other Ukrainians, we created the appraisal industry, right? And of course it's become perverted, let's say. But we initially created the appraisal industry, and I started teaching people how to be appraisers. And do you know the complaint I got? It was this kind of, oh, you don't understand Ukraine. Just a bunch of American bullshit. I'll stop. You're killing. What were they complaining about? They were telling me that they, Ukrainians, cannot do honest appraisal business the way I do because nobody will hire them. Yeah, Paul, you're working with foreign companies. They want honest appraising. Our clients tell us the value of the building. They tell us the value, and then we reverse engineer the value that they gave us. And if we don't do that, we won't have any work because we're not some American guy speaking English who can go work with American companies. And my answer to that is, oh, bullshit. That, by the way, is a technical term. You can look it up. It's in the dictionary. It's just not true. I have prospered financially, but I have turned away more clients than I have ever accepted to work with. And the first thing I tell every potential client, I have clients from all over the world, as well as Ukraine, and the first thing I tell them is, hey guys, I don't do cheap and I don't do fraud. I don't do cheap and I don't do fraud. And if you have if you want serious work for a serious purpose, and you're willing to pay fair but serious money, then I'm your guy. But I don't do fraud and I don't do cheap. I will tell you that is probably the worst marketing strategy ever created, because 90% of my clients walked out the door. Because who the hell do you think you are saying you're going to give me an independent value? You won't commit fraud. I'm paying you to commit fraud. I need you to put $1 million value on this chair so I can borrow money from the bank. And I've already organized a kickback with the bank chairman, so you're just screwing everything up. Who do you think you are? Get out of here. Now, that was the 90s. I would never have a conversation like that today. It's impossible. There's still bad people, bad companies. I think of Mr. Kolomoisky. But Ukrainian businesses now they're not operated. The executives are not a bunch of old red directors, a bunch of old Russian Soviet thinking guys. They're mostly women and men in their 30s and 40s. That's the driving force of this country are women and men in their mostly 30s and 40s. So you can make money, you can do good things. Maybe you have to do it on a small scale like I'm doing, but okay.
Daniil.
Anybody else foolish enough to ask
I
a
wanna
question?
ask more of a personal question. Why did you decide to move to Ukraine?
Well, great question. Great question. And I'll tell you the absolute honest answer. Opportunity. I had first of all, I was president of an international economics institute, and we had only foreign students, master's, PhD level, University of Colorado. And I went all over the world teaching different kinds of classes and programs. And then in January of 1994, I brought to my university, well, the State Department did, a group of 29, I can't remember now, 29 Ukrainians, as some bank presidents or bank chairman, a couple politicians, mostly normal people, not bank chairman and politicians. And my business partner was part of that group. And she said to me, I want to create an appraisal industry in Ukraine. And I said, I don't know anything about the appraisal business, the appraisal industry. But why do you want to create an appraisal industry in Ukraine? She said, well, it doesn't exist. Our government wants to privatize everything. Actually, they don't. Our government wants to privatize everything, but they don't know what anything is worth. They don't know the price of anything, the value of anything. So how the hell are they going to sell a company when they have no idea what it's worth? How are they going to sell a building if they have no idea what it's worth? And so I thought about it and I realized, oh my God, what an opportunity. Now, I then came to Ukraine, May of 94, because I was interviewing students for PhD programs, the government scholarships. And I came and I looked around and spent a couple of weeks traveling around, and I said, my God, I have never been, and I'd worked all over Asia, all over in Africa for 20-something years. And I thought, my God, I have never seen a country with more unrealized potential. I mean, this country is like Germany, but it's like a poorly managed Germany, not a poor country, poorly managed. So I saw just enormous opportunity. And I thought, wouldn't it be really cool to be one of the guys who created the appraisal industry in Ukraine, an industry that never existed in a country with such vast economic and political and cultural potential, power, power comes from culture mostly, right? People want to be like you. So that's why I came here. I came here to make money, to help build an industry that didn't exist because it just sounded like fun and it sounded like a really exciting, challenging thing to do. I was bored with academe. And so that's why I came here. And that's why you should stay here, by the way. I'm here.
I'm not planning to move. I'm staying in Ukraine for
Good.
now.
And even if you do go live in Poland, do you know why? Olga, forgive me. Do you know why the Basque separatist movement has been so quiet for decades? The Catalan separatist movement never seems to get off the ground anymore. Even Northern Ireland is more or less a better place than it used to be. And it's because they're all part of the European Union. Why should Catalonia become an independent country? What's it going to gain? It's a lot of time and work and expense and trouble. And hell, they're part of the greatest human creation in all of human history, called the European Union. So, staying in Ukraine, when I say, oh, you should stay, I say that because I think the opportunities here, especially for the next 25 years, are simply going to be greater opportunities to do business, make money responsibly, than you'll find in any of the other, older, more established European countries. This is the hot spot. This is the growth sector. Just like drones are a growth industry, right? IT is a growth industry. Well, Ukraine's a growth opportunity. But even some years from now, you can be contributing to Ukraine if you're living in France, because you're part of a huge cooperative economy. So. Uh-oh.
Alexander?
I'll probably
I
be the
love it.
last one.
You don't have to be.
You
Okay.
mentioned that the belief that corporations exist to maximize shareholder profits is false, right?
Well, I believe that idea is false. Yes.
Did you develop this position independently, or are you building on particular research or experiences? Because practically,
yeah.
the reality feels different. Like, take Apple as just one example. There still exist many big, huge corporations that seem very suspicious in that regard.
You mean suspicious in terms of operating sustainably, or suspicious in terms of employing millions of Chinese women and children in slave labor factories to which
Yeah,
is it?
well, the rhetoric about purpose is there, and they say that they don't support this, they strive to create a sustainable company, but their behavior doesn't really correspond to this, and they try to maximize profit.
Yes, yes, I absolutely agree. I absolutely agree. Thank you for saying that. You will Tim Cook, the CEO of Apple. I've heard that guy a million times use the phrase stakeholder capitalism, stakeholder capitalism. Schwartzman, the head of BlackRock, one of the most evil private equity firms on earth, Blackstone or BlackRock, can't remember. There's two of them. They talk about stakeholder capitalism. Go to Davos. Davos is where people go, corporate executives go to cleanse their reputations, and you'll hear a lot of talk about we care for the environment, we care about our communities, but they don't. And Apple's a perfect example. Apple doesn't care about anything except maximizing shareholder profit, no matter what they say. And I'm not saying they're like evil people. I'm saying they're operating within the economic paradigm that we created. We created the system that allows them to be very smart and very successful, but at the same time, quite frankly, very destructive to the world. And that's why we need to put some teeth into this idea of measuring, reporting, compensating all real stakeholders, communities, people, especially the environment. But you can't run basically a slave labor factory in China and then talk about stakeholder capitalism. I mean, you can, but So yeah, we got a long way to go. My our discussion, it's aspirational, right? This is where we need to go, and Apple's not there.